My day job is the music librarian for Warner Brothers. So that mainly entails um, just keeping the archive up to date with all of our new uh, feature film music, both the audio as well as the physical sheet music, um, and being able to also recall any scores from the past that have been archived by my predecessors and make that available to orchestras that want to perform it live, or publishing companies that want to publish our music for their ensemble. There's various reasons why people will need to recall them. So that's a little bit about what I do there. And when I'm not doing that, I'm either playing in a cumbia slash salsa band, my jazz trio, or making weird experimental synth loop based music. I don't know what to call it really, but something like that. um, and that's that's the majority of what I do
Yeah,
in a nutshell.
that's cool, man. Have you? So, what have you been working on recently? You got any cool new projects, or like as far as like I mean, anything really? But you said you had some like
Yeah,
synth
no.
sound and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I just released an album in June. Yes, it was June. Um, and it's called Instrumentals Volume 1. And it was just a collection of songs that I recently wrote with my loop station, where I basically would take synthesizers and guitars and loop them over each other and then record those loops and chop them up in Ableton and rearrange them to make actual like songs. So it's not just a 10-minute constant loop of um, music. So that was released, and I have still a lot of leftover material and other things that I just I had to put off to the side and say, okay, I'll tackle this set of songs later. And so now I'm actually getting ready to release a second volume. I'm hoping that'll be out by the end of September. That's the projected timeline for that project. But I'm simultaneously also working on producing a friend of mine's album. Her name is Annalise, which I know you've already heard actually some of the songs on this project, Randall, because you helped me record some drums at the studio there for it, which was super fun.
Yeah,
And that was
yeah.
just before lockdown. Man,
Oh,
what
I know.
seems like forever ago, right?
Yeah, yeah. I remember that. Yeah, that was fun. That was kind of like a covert operation. You know, we had to like to get into the building. Like they're just starting to close things down. I remember that. So like
Yeah,
they sent out an email that
just
morning.
before they closed it down.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
it wasn't official yet, so you're not going to get in trouble, right?
No. Well,
Just edit this part out later.
is that it out? Yeah.
um, no, that was a fun time.
Yeah.
That was a fun time.
So which I remember we there's like a few different artists, right?
Yeah, that's right. Actually, there was the other single that I was working on, and there's been some holdups with that, and we're going to actually redo the drums again. So,
Hmm.
you know, you know how it goes.
Yeah.
There's, one person has one vision, another person has another vision, and you got to make compromises to make that vision happen. So,
Right.
um, but that is also in the works. I won't say any sort of timeline for that project because it's got to just it's got to happen at its own pace.
Yeah.
Um, But I'm getting really close with Annalisa's album. Her name is Annalise Castillo. Go check her out. She's an awesome songwriter. We're working on a record together, and that one's coming actually really close to the finish line. I basically got a collection of her songs that she wrote, and she said just go to town with them, orchestrate them however you want, rearrange them however you want. Just I don't know where to take them from here, and I just want a fresh pair of ears on them. So I started, chopping up her verses and choruses and moving things around, and then writing bass lines and guitar parts and string parts and horn parts. And we got Raphael on the drums at that one session that we did, and those stems sound great. I already mixed some of those drums that we recorded, and they sound awesome.
So have you uh, worked doing like this, being a producer sort of thing before? Is this like what's that process been like for you?
It's always evolving for sure. I've worked on my own stuff, like through just writing and arranging music and producing my own music, but that's because that's how I hear it in my head. This is actually kind of some of my first venturing out into producing with other people, with collaborating with songwriters in particular. Because most of my music is pretty much instrumental. There's not a whole lot of lyrics or, um, you know, voices in general in my particular type of music that I like to create. So this has been a lot of fun to actually have somebody else kind of come up with the bones of a song, and have me bring that into reality for them, kind of like George Martin, I guess, from
Hmm.
from the Beatles. But that's he's one of my biggest inspirations. But it's been a really fun process because I've been able to implement all of these sort of tools that I've been learning just through the years of being a musician. That it's like everything kind of compounds on itself. Everything from performance and playing and writing and composing and recording and production, and like all these things are kind of like um, coming together in one project. And it's been really fun to see how that unfolds, and also give myself deadlines and timelines to meet, because without those I won't get anything done. So
Yeah, right.
that's just how I work.
Yeah.
But it's been really fun putting all these puzzle pieces together, and it's turning into something really awesome. I can't wait to show you these finished products. We're hoping to get that released before the end of the year, so be on the lookout for all that.
Yeah, that's really cool, man. Do you see, so you mentioned working on your own stuff. Do you see it differently being like having the producer hat on, working with someone else versus working just like your own music?
Absolutely. And I really appreciate it, because there were times where, for her project in particular, I'm actually working on a couple other projects as a just word of mouth from other people who have heard stuff that I've done. They say, "Hey, I have a song. I want you to help me work on that." But because hers is a whole album, I gotta say that it's nice to have feedback from somebody else, because I heard one song one way, you know, and I was hearing she wrote this song, and I was hearing it with sort of like trap beat, almost Billie Eilish, kind of that, very melodic but uh, dark trap ish pop, I guess. I don't know. I heard it with that sort of style. And then she was like, actually, I was thinking it should be like, and this is going to sound so out of left field, she said I was hearing it more as like something like Benny and the Jets from Elton John, and I was like, oh, okay. And both versions like just did not appease either of us, and we were like, let's try it as a cumbia, because that's and I swear it's like the song sounds like it should, like that's the way it was supposed to sound from the beginning. But
Mm.
it took that sort of like approach of like, okay, here's some chords and a melody with some lyrics. Where does your mind take you when you hear this? And mine was in a totally different headspace than hers, and hers was in a totally different space than mine. And both of us were like, okay, we got to find something that works for the both of us. And it was something that was completely different than both of the ideas, which were already very different to begin with, to find this final version. And that was a moment for me that I thought was really exciting, because if it was just up to me, if I was just working by myself and I was in this, if she was taken out of the equation, you know, it would have been something totally different, and in my opinion, probably not as good compared to what it's turning into now, So that was a really fun experience with working with somebody else that I'm always looking forward to. And just getting the feedback and encouragement too throughout the process is always, it's just nice. It's very rewarding.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. Feeling a part of like a collaborative process or like a band is it's uh it's just a different process, you know. There's like it's cool to be able to have the collaborative effort, you know, or to bounce off ideas and stuff. And
Hmm.
it's different because you know you'd come up with things you wouldn't normally come up with. Um,
Yeah.
but in some ways, from my own personal experience, like I've been in bands, it was like almost too democratic. Everyone has their own
Yeah.
opinion, and then we sort of clash and like, um,
Well, you got to pick your battles, right?
yeah, yeah,
You know, like there were definitely moments like that where I was hearing one thing and she was like, "No, I'm not feeling that." And sometimes, I'd be like, "Yeah, you're right. It doesn't need it." Even though I thought deep down maybe it could be there, it wouldn't be that bad. But I was like, I'll let this one go. But then there have been times where I was like, this song needs this, and the same thing happens. It's just a give and take sort of. That's been working for me so far, at least.
yeah.
Um, so,
Do you
but I
find
hear you. There's definitely been times where I've butt heads with not her, but other people, and yeah, you know.
do you find it easier? Because like sometimes I notice like in the creative process, you kind of have to shut off the part of the brain that's like critical of like things you do just to like start working with ideas. Um, do you
Yeah.
find it easier to be like critical and make those sort of like decisions sitting in like the producer chair rather than also being the creating the main bones of like the songs and stuff?
Yeah, kinda. Because, well, it depends on the situation. But to me, when somebody is tasked with the role of producer, that means that they're kind of steering the ship, you know. They're the ones who have to make those decisions, you know. And once again, it's a give and take for sure. But it's definitely a different power dynamic than being just the bass player, right?
Yeah.
Or just the drummer in the session, or just the engineer. Like when you're the producer, it's like you have a certain set of obligations, just like the engineer has his set of obligations. And so that's why I think it's easier for me to make that decision if I've been tasked with being the producer.
Have you listened to Cardi B's WAP?
What'd you call me? No, I'm just kidding. um, have I listened to it?
Yeah.
Randall, I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. I have not clicked play on that song. Not out of like any sort of like pretentiousness, being
Yeah.
like, "Ah, I refuse to play that song." Like I haven't felt really compelled to spend any time on it just quite yet.
Yeah.
I have heard it because I scroll through Instagram and Snapchat, and you hear the song through. I've heard the song through there, or like it's playing on the radio in the background of a store, or not that I've gone to stores, but like out in the cars, or
Mm-hmm.
you just hear it around, right?
Yeah.
Uh, so, in my very long-winded answer to your question, I kind of have heard it. I get the gist of it. I'm
Well,
pretty sure my brain can fill in all the blanks, but
yeah, yeah. I I looked it up just because I saw some posts about it, just for like educational purposes, like what's this hype about, and I feel
of
like
course,
we should just you should just look it up right now and
I'm
just watch like
gonna
just
just watch the
just
video.
yeah, the video. You don't need to watch the whole thing because like you get the gist of it, but just
Yeah,
because
no,
I'd like to hear your opinion on it. I don't know, like
I think if I give an opinion on it, I'm gonna look up the explicit version. By the way,
okay,
if I give an opinion, I ought to see it in its full glory. So
yeah,
stand by. Can you hear this in the background? Oh my god.
yeah. Just I mean, it's not long. Just watch the whole thing. I'll be.
Yeah, yeah. Okay. I'm gonna just start scrolling through at this point. Okay. There's this weird little scene. Who's that? Is that what's her name? I like these use of color palettes. Well, okay. Alrighty. Randall, I'm back on planet Earth with you.
Cool. So, what would your unbiased musical opinion of this piece be?
Well, from a collegiately educated standpoint on music, by the way, meaning I have a degree in music. Uh, for those who did not catch that, um, you know, I gotta say, it's it's the definition of the phrase "sex sells," and the reason being that I can guarantee you that song has made infinitely more money than anything that I've ever put out combined for the next 100 years. So, is it music? Yes. It's got rhythm, it's got lyrics, it's got rhyming, it's got tonal qualities, and somebody had to, you know, mix it, master it, produce it, put it out on the market it. Cardi B had to sing it, you know. That it is music. It is popular. It's probably made a crap load of money. It's going to probably be used to sell who knows what sort of products. You know, it's got commercial and it's got what it's got. But will I listen to it ever after this? Personally, no, probably not. No offense, Cardi B.
Hmm.
It's just, does she listen to avant-garde jazz every day? Maybe, probably not. Maybe that'd be awesome, but the point is that it's not for everybody. I don't think I listen to Gregorian chant or Tibetan throat singing on the daily. It's just not my thing. No offense to anybody who loves that song.
Hmm.
You know, that's you. More power to you. I gotta say though, the video was really well done, although it was very, very, you know, risque
Yeah.
and a
Well,
little vulgar.
there's
You
there's
know,
no
it
denying the production value of it. Like it's definitely
yeah.
high quality, like put together. Um,
And even
but
the concept of how, like the perspectives were very distorted and the walls were all crooked in the beginning, and it's got a lot of really cool surreal elements to it, or how like certain rooms would have very specific color palettes assigned to them or themes. I thought that was all really well done, I gotta say. you know
well,
that's my 2 cents on.
do you think there's anything within? So we've been talking about like our opinions of it, but do you think there's anything within music that can be objectively good or of quality, or objectively bad or not of quality?
Well, I love the quote from Duke Ellington, which is, there's only two kinds of music: there's good music and there's bad music. And I think the thing is that it's really objective to begin with, or it's subjective. It's not objective. It's like, it really is just depending on individuals, because there's some people out there, and this is going to be forever. There's always going to be some people who love the Beatles, and there's going to be some people who just don't like the Beatles, you know? And it's just that it's not for everybody. It's not always relevant for everybody, depending on types of music. So I don't think there is ever good or bad music, because it's just, it will resonate with some and it will not resonate with others. That's just the bottom line. I mean, there's definitely some music that requires a lot more craft and a lot more time and dedication into creating versus other types of music. Easy example would be like, a three-piece punk rock band does not require as many musicians, microphones, years of studying music theory as it does to record a full orchestra playing a suite, that
Hmm.
some composer wrote for a film, for example. Those are two completely different types of music. And does that mean that one's good and another's bad? No, I think they both can be good. It doesn't. I don't know. It's a. I feel like I'm constantly contradicting myself in everything that I'm saying.
I
you
don't.
know.
I don't think you have.
Um,
I totally follow what
I
you're
don't think
saying.
there is good or bad music. You know.
No, I don't think you've contradicted yourself at all. I don't think there's many things like within music or art you could say are objective. I think you can say that a lot of art and music is enjoyable because of patterns, like patterns within the sound or the structure or like
Yeah.
beats or riffs or whatever.
Patterns
Um,
within patterns. Yeah.
yeah, but your refrigerator can make a noise and it can have a pattern. That's not saying much. Um,
Yeah. That's true.
but I do think that certain genres have things that are subjective to them. If you said punk rock, for example, if someone's playing punk rock and they're like out of tune, most people probably wouldn't care. But if you play that into like the classical setting and someone's playing out of tune in like a suite, like the first
Yeah.
violin's playing out
It's
of tune the
really.
entire
Yeah.
time, like they wouldn't they wouldn't be allowed back, like
Yeah.
um
You went to the wrong gig, buddy.
yeah. Right.
um,
There's
definitely. Yeah, there definitely can be, there can be bad music within, I guess, stylistic goals. Yeah.
mhm,
Or even if it was the opposite, if somebody was playing a punk rock gig but they had a nylon string acoustic guitar and
yeah,
did not even plug it into, a distortion box, people would be like, this is not punk rock. This needs
yeah,
to, this is some hippie music right here or something. So it's
yeah,
it goes both ways.
mhm,
I guess Okay, so I was looking at it on a more global scale across all sorts of music, I guess, but
Hmm.
within specific genres, yeah, there can definitely be bad music.
Yeah.
Now that we're talking about it, actually, but then again, sometimes when you juxtapose things and flip things around, you can create new things that may not necessarily sound good on paper, but when you execute it, it's awesome.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I remember the first time I heard a mixture between sort of like almost emo and pop punk and rap. Basically, the first time I heard it, I was like, this is awesome. But if somebody was describing it to me, I would be like, that sounds weird. I don't know how that would fly, you know?
Yeah.
So, but it's because they're kind of outside of each other's realms
Hmm.
that when you do mix the two, it's awesome. but
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think people that go outside the norms, like that's how you get really cool, new, innovative stuff. All kinds of music does that. Like fusion, blending different styles of music together that wouldn't necessarily go together normally.
yeah,
Yeah, and there's a lot of examples of that. With popular music today, or someone like Charles Ives.
well, that's
That
bad music right there. For no, just kidding.
bad music,
Charles
Charles Ives.
Ives just across the board. That's just straight up bad music.
Well, yeah, of course. Uh,
That's classical and out of tune.
yeah.
Already two strikes. No, I'm just kidding.
Out of tune. It's funny. Have you messed around with like microtonal music at all?
No. Well, sort of, a little bit. Like, only in the sense that my synth has ways to like detune itself so it gets in that microtonal realm where you're like, is that sharp or flat or not? Or
Yeah.
all of them. you know? But not extensively, no. You do a little bit of that though, right? Didn't you tune your piano to
Yeah. Yeah.
microtonal?
I've dabbled a little bit in that, but yeah, what you're talking about. I had so I had an upright piano that my mom's neighbor, uh, her husband used to play, but he passed away, so she didn't know what to do with it. So she's like, "Do you want a piano?" I was like, "Yeah." And then so I had an upright
Why not?
piano, and then so basically I like what I was trying to do, like is to make it into like quarter tones, you know, so like uh, a step
So each
in
step
between.
was actually a quarter.
Yeah, like in between semitones, like A half
Yeah.
sharp and A sharp, and you know. So I was kind of aiming for that,
Ooh,
but I've
yeah.
never tuned a piano before, so like I wasn't very good at it, and it was like an
Hard.
old piano, so it kind of
Oh
just
man.
became like its own thing, which was still cool, like as an experiment to do. And yeah, I think I have like a video somewhere where like I played this Chopin piece, like the Fantasy Impromptu, like on this piano that's like super
That's
out of
right.
tune.
I saw that.
Yeah, and that was
It was a study in rhythm is what it was. Because
oh
you played all the same rhythms from that
yeah,
piece, but
yeah,
you know, technically all the notes were different.
yeah. Like I could kind of like recognize it, like oh that's that Chopin thing, but not.
Mm-hmm.
um,
Probably be good for like a prepared piano too. Like you could throw some screws and
yeah,
nails and little shreds of metal throughout it, tinfoil.
yeah. I don't have it anymore, unfortunately, because I moved and I couldn't like I don't have space for it. So, but
You mean you didn't take your out of tune upright piano with you?
uh,
Monster.
yeah. Yeah, that was cool that to see you do that stuff live, that performance you did. What I also thought was really cool is like you had that some kind of drum machine or something that was like not necessarily, it like wasn't locked to a grid with like the other loops that you're doing. So it like kind of
uh,
slowly get like out of phase a
out of
little bit,
phase.
you know? Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate that. It's always good. Just quick little compositional uh, factoid nugget right here for those listening. Um, that it's good to have something off the grid sometimes. Because if everything's always quantized and perfectly cut straight to a grid, it sounds way too uh, mechanical, I guess. It's good to always, not always, but once in a while introduce something that is totally not synced to a specific grid at all. It helps just kind of give interest and liveliness to it. Otherwise, very sterile sound.
Yeah. It kind of loses a little bit of like the human element, if everything's always locked to the grid.
Right. Especially with that rig that I had that you saw, everything is technically being controlled through the loop station. So that sends out like a master clock signal to the synthesizer and my arpeggiators. And
Mm.
so everything can start sounding very mechanical very quickly. So that's why it's good to have like I had what you were referring to actually is not the drum machine. It was a delay pedal that I had, but you could create a sound on sound loop that is basically just, it's like having a free set of time. That's the wrong wording. It's like having a little tape loop where it's not locked to like a quantized grid or a
Yeah.
digital signal of any sort. It's completely free. Yeah, I would use that sometimes just to throw in some cool little melody that would just start slowly getting offset by the beats over time. Stuff like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, that was really cool because like a lot of people that do loops and stuff, like that everything is like, right on the grid because it needs to be
Hmm.
for what they're doing.
Yeah.
Um yeah, so that was really cool to like see and hear, happen.
Thanks, man.
Um
It's a little scary sometimes. I'm not gonna lie, because it's totally improvised in nature, so you can have an idea of how you want something to turn out, and
mhm.
it will kind of sometimes take its own life. Sometimes it'll kind of go as planned or close to as planned, but I appreciate that. It's something that's just, it's been really fun for me just to kind of like almost use as not only a compositional process and tool, but just even as like almost like a meditative thing. Like sometimes, like, when you're just sitting around the house and you're just like noodling on guitar, it's not like you're really practicing anything. Do you do that? Or is it just me?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, I do that.
you do,
It's
right? Where it's just like
mhm.
you're not practicing, you're just kind of like noodling. And so it's kind of like that, I guess, where it's just like, it's fun to just kind of explore certain textures or sounds and concepts for composition and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's kind of the nature of analog synths too. You kind of get a new sound every time you tinker with it, and it's like hard to like really compose something in the traditional sense that it's the same sound every time because it's like hard to get to the exact same sound every time. At least for me when I've experimented with like analog synths of like trying to get, oh, this sounds really cool, like how do I get back to that one thing? But like it's always
Yeah,
like when I go back to it, that sound is like gone forever. It's just
I know.
it was cool
Yeah,
to
that's kind of the catch of it, I guess. Is that it's kind of it forces you to be in the moment in the sense that it's like you're directly manipulating the sound, and it forces you to be that much more present while you're doing it. Although I agree, getting back to those presets if you don't have a way to save them is a little frustrating sometimes.
Yeah.
um,
I find it funny to imagine like they just have like a whole team of people just like looking through other music to see if it violates their copyright. I mean, do you know if like they have more
well,
people on staff like just looking through stuff or?
not that I'm aware of, but I know that a lot of, I can tell you that a lot of the first round of like filtering out stuff, a lot of it's actually done nowadays through AI and
Yeah.
algorithms. So you just upload your music, and it even works for people who have uploaded to Spotify and stuff. It's not exclusive to us by any means, but
Hmm.
a lot of times when music gets uploaded and processed by these and ID'd by these AIs, they can pick up not only the recordings of like the original recordings, but they'll flag people's videos, of course, that are doing covers and stuff. So it's not even like that specific recording. They're looking for certain melodic patterns, words, chord progression, harmony. Like there's all these other things that it's not even human going through them.
Yeah.
So I'm sure after that point, there's some sort of person or team or way to kind of further investigate all of these claims. But yeah, I'm definitely one of the people in the chain that if it gets escalated high enough, they'll have me listen and say, yeah, well, the melody is totally the same, or oh, well, they kind of changed this around, so it's different enough, or there's
Yeah.
it's a mixed bag. Depends on the exact situation. So
Yeah. No, that makes total sense.
never a dull moment.
Yeah. It totally makes sense that they would have AI doing that sort of thing. Um,
Yeah, the thousands of videos that get uploaded every day. It's like
yeah.
it'd be impossible for people
Yeah.
to keep up with that.
I remember there was another thing I remember we were talking about before. Someone that developed some AI program or something to like mix, and it was some like you just upload a song and it would mix it for you. Do you
Yeah,
know?
I'm sure they have that.
I thought that was you that I talked
Um,
about that with, but
I think we were talking about mastering actually.
maybe okay,
Um,
mastering.
I'm sure there is a mixing version too, but actually, I ended up using an AI to master my first instrumentals album,
Hmm.
and I gotta say, it turned out pretty good. The levels all came out nice, and the bass was punchy, and you got a little extra clarity in the synths and stuff. It definitely recompressed and reanalyzed the music for the better. I didn't exactly compare it to a human mastering, so I it could have been better, but for my purposes, I actually didn't mind it. I
Yeah.
thought it was pretty good.
Yeah, it's interesting like getting AI involved with like music, like computer programs that can like, create music, quote unquote. Yeah, I've listened to like a few of like the songs generated by like some of these like, computers or whatever. It's kind of weird, you know. I don't know. Do you have any
It
thoughts about
is.
that or?
It's changed over time because
Mm,
when I first heard about it, I was like, "Oh God! Now the computers are coming for our jobs as composers," and then people are going to get used to hearing like the most lame sort of computer-generated music in the world, and all that stuff. And
mm,
then I went to some little seminars at the NAM convention this year, and they touched on the topic of AI generated music in a couple of these particular seminars. And the way that people were looking at it was more of just like it isn't replacing the composer, it's more like an assistant where it will, you can just sort of like plug in variables and it will generate something like within seconds. And if you don't like it, you just have it generate something again. And then until you find something like, oh, that's kind of cool. And then you could work with it from there. And so they were sort of implying it's more of like a co-composer or like a tool or another instrument available to you.
yeah.
which totally opened my mind up to the possibilities of it. Even to the point that recently, actually, I started looking at creating generative music within Ableton Live, where you can pretty much have like you can have like a MIDI pattern, let's say, and have it play on loop. And then that MIDI pattern can get fed into things that are generating notes, and then you can have those notes get fed into a thing that generates specific scales. And so then you can make it tonal, and then you can have it, also be triggering drums, and have it be pretty much completely to the point that you have all these little, it's almost like modular synthesis, but within Ableton Live. So instead of having little modular things doing specific tasks and routing them to each other, you're just doing it all inside the box. So it's fascinating to me, actually, at this point, to like get into that where you're taking yourself out of the whole idea of, oh, I'm going to play this G minor chord, and then it's going to go to D7, and then like having to think about notes and chords and all that, and you're thinking more like, okay, I want a note to be generated every 3/16 notes instead of, and then move to half notes, and you're like thinking more of like values and ratios and dynamics and other things other than just the notes themselves. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like you're planning out and manipulating the variables that are creating the sound.
Yeah, that's almost like a form of like serialism,
Yeah,
what composers did with like the
exactly.
12 tone, it's just a different type of process you're
Yep,
putting on your composition.
exactly. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like you set the variables, and then you have it unwind itself, essentially. You're exactly right. The parallels between serialism and that are actually incredibly similar, where you're not making decisions based on musicality, but based on, well, in the case of serialism, it's based off of the limitations you set by that cell that you create.
Hmm.
Versus, I agree.
Yeah, yeah.
My thoughts are rushing faster than I can speak, but I agree completely with what you're saying about the parallels between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's very fast.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, that's kind of the conclusion I've reached too about computer generated music. Because the stuff they're feeding into it, like there's still a human that has to like set the parameters for the music that it creates, right? So they feed it a bunch of pop music or classical music or whatever. What it creates, is just a new jumbled version of like one of those songs in that style. So
Yeah,
I really see it as like just another tool. It feels a little bit more creepy at first, but uh, yeah,
exactly.
but there's like other examples of that too, like using of composers using like computers to generate certain parameters for things, not necessarily like complete songs, but I think the composer like Xenakis uh, used like some computer. He had some computer music and like there's some program that he used. I'm not super familiar with it, so I'm not gonna touch too much about it. But I know like Brian Ferneyhough used some computer program generate some of these ratios that he would use for his music, like some of the polyrhythms that he would use.
Hmm.
He would there was a program. Are you familiar with Brian Ferneyhough and like the new complexity composers?
I can't say I'm actually super familiar. I'm
Yeah,
going to write that down and look them up.
yeah. So it's basically like kind of part of like the new complexity school or whatever. Just like, but
Okay.
basically his scores, what they'll look like is like um, series of like hyper complex polyrhythms, like 92 uh, versus 116, and then like under
Oh my
that,
god.
like 3 against 7, and then like nested tuplets, like all that kind of stuff. 17 against 15, 13 against 24, 3 against 7, 5
My God,
against 8, and there's a series of them
it
with
sounds
like
like a
nest.
headache.
Yeah. So
I'm
like
just joking.
there'll be like a big 92 versus 37, and then inside that there'll be like another nested tuplet of like 3 against 7, and then inside that there'll be another nested tuplet of like triplets. It's just super hyper dense
Yeah,
music. And then
tuplets, tuplets.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I think like 3 levels as far as he goes, like nested tuplet inside a nested tuplet. um but Yeah, but there would be, if you kind of like analyze the score, you start to see like certain ratios will kind of pop up again and again, like 10 against 11, I think was one that he'd use kind of frequently. Um, but he was using a computer program to basically generate these like the ratios. So like a computer program would like basically punch out a list of all these ratios, and then he would just pick a few that he liked and then use that
Wow.
in his composition. So that's like another example of just like, it's just like another tool, like another process
Yeah.
similar to like
Or like
scoring.
when composers would
Yeah,
roll the dice to, you know, yeah, it's just generative, which is really, I think, the foundation, the working word there is like, it kind of kickstarts the engine for you and inspires you to either reject or roll with it, you know?
played around a little bit with that idea too of like creating new processes and stuff. As a composer myself, like I'm always struggling with the idea of like I want to do something new, like I don't want to keep creating the same
Yeah,
music I've been creating. So then
yeah,
I have the feeling that if I'm always relying on my intuition or what's like naturally sounds good to me, that I will, kind of revert to like just recreating the same things. So like my
yeah.
thought process is like, how can I get out of creating a process might be a way to get out of what I would normally write.
Totally. That, and for me, I've also found that really kind of focusing on sonic palette makes a difference for me in terms of writing music. Like if I'm writing for just because with a laptop, and Logic or Ableton, you can literally create anything. It's like the universe is your imagination is really your limit in that circumstance. So I like to limit myself sometimes to just thinking about, okay, I'm only going to use acoustic and electric guitar for a track, you know,
Hmm.
and limiting your sonic palette in that sense. Or like thinking, oh, okay, I'm going to create a song that's going to have only synthesizer and sampled instruments. Or, just figuring out what your limitations are, I think, help a ton for like getting new, so you don't fall in those pit holes of like writing the same sort of stuff. Because when I hear certain instruments, I feel more inclined to write certain ways. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like if I'm holding an acoustic guitar, I'll play it way differently than I'll play an electric guitar versus a
Yeah,
mandolin, you know.
definitely.
And
Yeah, there's just like,
yeah,
a certain connotation that goes along with certain instruments, like, banjo is like associated with the South, and bluegrass.
totally.
Um,
But also, and taking those traditions and totally flipping them too, because like I've heard one of my one of my friends plays. She plays like everything that's basically stringed, but she can read so wickedly well that she was holding this like tenor banjo thing. I think it was a tenor banjo one time, and just started like sight reading some Bach on
hmm,
it, and it sounded freaking so cool. Just because it was refreshing because you never hear Bach on that sort of instrument timbre, you know?
yeah.
And I mean, people like, what's his name? Chris Steele? Isn't that his name? I'm probably butchering his name. He's a mandolin player. Yeah, Chris Thile Thiele. He's a mandolin player who does that, bluegrass stuff wickedly well. But then he has albums where he's playing, violin sonatas by Bach and
Mm,
all those classical repertoire on non-traditional instruments.
yeah, I think I've seen a video of him playing. I could be wrong, but it was a guy playing mandolin. He was playing like Bach or something. Um,
Yep, it was probably him.
yeah,
He's the only guy in the world that does
yeah,
that. Yeah, definitely helping. Like, to me, if I feel like I'm been writing the same sort of stuff over and over, I'll just try and throw a different instrument into the mix or rework something with different instruments or limit myself to using only a certain palette.
yeah. That's cool. Do you see that in like, or have you noticed that in like film music too? That there's like kind of like trends or like cliches, I guess, that tend to happen a lot.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's nothing new either. I mean, one of the most famous examples is 2001 Space Odyssey. The original score for it, well, the score that they use in the film is all 20th century classical music, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was a very conscious choice by the director because previous to that, the cliche for space music was, like a theremin and,
Yeah.
all that. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So music totally may seem irrelevant for something at a certain point, but it inevitably always becomes cliche and outdated by something else. Another great example, if you listen to a lot of scores from the 80s, that's when synthesizers were just starting to get mass produced, and that's where they really developed, was obviously in the 80s.
Mm-hmm.
So it had an effect on the film music to the point that not all, but a lot of film scores had, arpeggiated bass lines and synths,
Mm-hmm.
and the sounds that are very cliche or can be thought of as cliche, but just era defining, and as you go into the 90s, everything becomes way more orchestral. It's like they almost got sick of that whole synthesized orchestra sound,
Mm-hmm.
like Blade Runner and stuff, which is
Oh
brilliant,
yeah.
by the way. Like the Blade Runner soundtrack was revolutionary for its time, but started influencing all the film scores of the era, and everybody was starting to rip off of it, and it just became cliche. And then in the 90s, everything gets super orchestral. 2000s, it's actually kind of a hybrid of both. And you get people like Hans Zimmer who are at the forefront with like Inception, that has a ton of sequenced drums and synthesizers, plus really amazing orchestral writing on top of that. It's kind of the best of both worlds, to the point that everybody started copying that sound, and it's happening again. And there's it's definitely a thing, I think, which is
Yeah.
cool because it's always evolving. Similar like jazz, like if jazz never evolved, it would have it still sound like it would still sound like the music from the 30s, like that
Mm-hmm.
very almost cartoon like New Orleans traditional style, like it
Yeah.
evolved out of that into big band and cool jazz and avant-garde and contemporary and all these different subgenres. Film music's similar in the same sense. It constantly is morphing and changing, and also sort of, there are sort of cycles that you can see, because sort of, I'd almost say, starting to become a revival in like musicals. When you think about movies like Frozen, In the Heights, which is going to come out, that's a huge musical. La La Land was a musical. Like,
Yeah.
there's these big Broadway-esque musical productions, which I wouldn't say were as popular 5 or 10 years ago. And that whole sense of the big Broadway orchestra thing is super cool and totally making a comeback.
Yeah, and that kind of reminds me of Phantom of the Opera, where the music in that had like a lot of synth and a lot of like orchestral stuff, combined. Recent times with like COVID and everything, Broadway and really like all live performance and events have like took like a huge hit.
It's tragic.
All the like globally, all the like entertainment. industries. It's weird times.
Yeah, but I think it's if there's one thing to, appreciate is that even though, yeah, touring is canceled, shows are not happening, that totally didn't crush the music creativity or spirit amongst people. You know, if anything,
Yeah.
it stoked the fire because people are recording and writing and just making the most of the situation no matter what. It's just kind of what we do.
Yeah.
Can't stop it. So, and it's important to just, I always have to remind myself, especially that it's not permanent.
Yeah.
This is hopefully just a little blip in history, and before you know it, we'll be able to go back to stadiums and have crowds of people shoulder to shoulder shouting along to lyrics, of their favorite band. Hopefully that's going to be, it's going to be something to go back to. It's not going to be like this forever. I'm hoping.
Yeah. I think so too.
This is only temporary. Everything's temporary, but this is definitely temporary too.
Careful there. You're getting a little philosophical with that.
Sorry. I'll hold back.
Yeah. Trying to enter film composition right now is weird too.
Kind of the way that it works in terms of mentorship is that if you show up to the gig and you do what's asked of you, which is, sometimes maybe it's already written out and you just need to make a mini mock-up of the score, or you're tasked with orchestrating a piano reduction that the composer wrote. There's different jobs and levels of creation that happens within a composer's team that's completely normal. And, that's how you gain experience. That's how you gain contacts and credibility, really, so that if a composer gets into a situation that they're like, hey, I'm working on 3 other projects. I can't take this, but I'll give it to you if you want it. That's kind of the how the relationship works. I don't know if I would call it like I don't know if I would go as far as to call it exploitation or anything like that. It's like because if you think about it, who if you're a film composer or if you want to compose for film, who would not want to work with an A-list level composer in Hollywood and get the bragging rights to say, hey, I worked on a blockbuster with so and so? That's a great thing on your resume, regardless of how much you got paid to do the gig. It still looks great on a resume, and you make contacts with people who are definitely in the business. Because I gotta say, one thing about the whole film score scene is that I think it's actually not very big. It's not as big as a lot of people make it out to be. Globally, it is pretty big, but in terms of down here in Southern California, there's only so many people who are really doing it full time, and the ones that are doing it full time, they have multiple projects they're doing, so they need a team of people to help them, and that's kind of how it happens. Like, I mean, one of the perfect examples that I can think of this being true for is, like, if I'm not mistaken, I want to do my research super quick, but I think Benjamin Wallfish started co-composing with Hans first. I do know what happens though, where a composer has, a team of assistants, and through their success, they get projects on, TV shows, Netflix series, Netflix movies. Like, they get their own foot in the door through these major composers. So if you go onto like Hans Zimmer's website, he lists a team of people that he's worked with through his very extensive career.
Hmm.
And there's people on here like Benjamin Wallfish, let's see, Henry Jackman, James Newton Howard, John Powell. Like, these are all people that he has co-wrote with which are very successful composers on their own, of course, as well. But if you keep scrolling down, he lists arrangers, orchestrators, conductors, individual musicians, technical staff. Like, these guys have so many people that they are reliant on to produce their music that there's plenty of opportunity out there in terms of trying to get your foot in that door. It just depends on what you want to specialize in. Do you want to be a composer? Do you want to work more on recording? Do you want to be more of like, an arranger? And you just gotta do it. That's the thing. You have to have a portfolio ready. You can't just knock on his door and say, "Hey, I'm a composer.
Right.
Can
Yeah.
I have a job?" And
Yeah.
you have to have a portfolio together to be like, "Well, this is where I'm at,"
Hmm.
and but that's just one guy too. Another person who's actually very open to interns and education is Tom Hulkenberg. Do you know him? Junkie XL. He did like Mad Max. That's probably one of his bigger ones, but he's done a ton of scores. He just did Terminator, the new Terminator movie too. He's very cool because he's a one of those guys who does a mixture of orchestra and can also be very synth heavy. He has this giant modular rack in his office that's intimidating.
Hmm.
But he's got a YouTube channel, which I'd recommend looking into because he talks a lot about the film scoring process. And I follow him on Instagram too. And one time I saw he was like advertising for he was looking for an intern or an assistant or something. He's like, if you have an interest in film music and blah blah blah. So opportunities like that are always popping up, and it's just you got to be on the lookout for them. The people that I know that you know have ghostwriters or work with other people, they usually get the credit and the payment that is, I'm sure, appropriate.
Yeah.
But it's kind of just like you can't going back to like what I said, you can't just like show up and say, "Hey, hire me." You gotta do the work before you get the job. And the benefits are like, if you do a good job at ghostwriting and stuff, it leads to bigger and better projects and all that because you produce good work, people are going to want to constantly work with you.
Yeah. I bought your album, by the way. I listened to it. I thought it was cool. It's been a while since I listened
Awesome.
to it, but yeah, I have it on my
Hey, man.
laptop.
Thank you so much. Do you like it?
Yeah, yeah, it's cool. I kind of had to
Every
work
single
to
note?
yeah. I liked at least 10% of it. So
At least 10%. Woohoo! Man, I think that's
nah.
the best review I've got yet. I met Gordon Goodwin, who's a. Do you know who Gordon Goodwin is? He's a
No.
big band
No.
arranger and writer. He also did the Animaniacs theme. He's just one of those guys who's just a really good big band writer. And I met him one time. He was playing at my school, and I said to him, I was like, "Hey, man, love your music." And he's like, "Really, every note?" And he just like looked me dead in the eye when he said that, and I just kind of like, of course I said yes, but like it was just it was funny. So that's where I got that from. If you ever want to put someone on the spot, just like,
That's funny.
I'm sorry, Randall.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was a character in a good way. Not
Yeah.
that he's ever going to listen to this podcast, but
Yeah. Yeah, so you said you're working on another one, right? Is that like a sequel to it, or is it just like another like collection of things that you got, or
sort of. Yes. It is a sequel in the sense that it's going to be a collection of instrumentals. So it's going to be called, you guessed it, Instrumentals Volume 2. And some of the songs are totally new. I recorded them either for the last album and they just I didn't work on them in that time span, or I thought, oh, I'll save that for later. But actually, some of the songs are songs that I've already released, but like on SoundCloud or Bandcamp type of things. So I'm remixing them and redoing the samples because they had like stock sample library sounds that were not mixed very well to begin with. So I'm using better sample libraries. I'm just gonna rework the songs because I was listening to them and I want to do them more justice than the form they're currently in. And there's actually going to be some more live musicians other than myself on them. I'm having a few friends sit in on various woodwinds and horns, and my friend Raphael is going to be on drums for one of the songs too. They're all my music, but it's not just me on the records anymore, which is pretty exciting and fun. It's a continuation of the last album, but at the same time, it's kind of its own thing, and I'm really excited to release it. And it's going to be an interesting sound because the last one was very sort of post-rock, synth-driven, like melodic music, and this is a lot more classical, and I'd even say contemporary classical, just based on texture, harmony, and stuff like that. Form. It's got all those elements going on, which I'm excited to release. So I'm hoping to get some sync license placement with some of these songs too. So if anybody's looking for any music for their just plug myself right now.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, thanks. It's been a fun process, just like gathering the tracks and recording all the appropriate overdubs, and also becoming a better mixing engineer, just looking up more and trying out new things. And because before I had no idea what I was doing. Now I've actually got some sort of fundamental understanding, I'd say, at the very least.
Yeah. You got like your setup over there or something, right? Did you want to play something?
Sure. I could do a little, just kind of like come up with some quick little something and see how it all pans out. Okay. Can you hear that?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Let's see what we got here. Alrighty. I just had to plug my keyboard in. I'll just talk you through it really quick. I have a MIDI keyboard that has an arpeggiator controlling a micro Korg synthesizer, and that is all going into my Boss loop station, where is getting recorded and looped, and then it's all playing out of this little speaker. When I improvise on this thing, I like to think about concepts of like minimalism and going back to like what I was saying earlier about limiting your like sonic palette. I'll try and stick to just a couple elements like bass, lead, sometimes a counter melody, but just keep it more simple and really try and utilize space. So now I'm going to program a sequence.
was really cool, man. Yeah, that was great. Thank you.